When it comes to investing in retirement, you have two real options. And the good news is that you can choose which is right for your life. Whether you're retired or sometime in the next decade, it helps. Because what is really important is to understand the pros and cons of each approach, so you can find the one that really suits your situation. Before we discuss examples of how these two investment styles play a role in actual retirement income plans, let me briefly introduce them. Your retirement plan involves much more than picking investments. Yes, you need the right investment plan, but every change you make there will directly affect your income plan, which is really mini plan too. Then the two must work with part 3, your tax plan, to reduce the annual bills the IRS sends you after retirement. Investment, income and taxes are the three main ingredients for turning decent retirement plans into great plans. And that is how we build them in our companies. To be honest, what we see is a combination of these three, which gives customers the most confidence in what will happen next. If we hadn't met, I'd be Dave Zoller, who has been a financial advisor for 14 years. The company I own with Tim, Luke, and Sean is called Streamlined Finance, and we have found that focusing on all three areas while improving real alpha is not only through smarter investments, but also through tax savings accumulated year after year. Surprisingly, most of the added value actually comes from income tax, not investment. The problem is that most big companies and most consultants stop investing. When you ask any tax-related question, you hear the same sentence: talk to your CPA. If you're working with someone who focuses only on investment, or if you're retired and start to think the puzzle is much more complicated than others told you, go to Streamline Planning. Come below and start applying for a free planning course on the homepage. Well, let's get started. Here is a sample of best and worst case retirement plans. Ignore the numbers and focus, instead, on shapes. Because most retirement plans look like this: shrinking first and then expanding over time. The tools we use run Monte Carlo analysis, which means that 1,000 different scenarios will be tested as planned, which is important because we don't know what tomorrow will look like. Letting customers know all these possibilities has proved comforting. What you see now is based on the current investment strategy of customers and their plans for the rest of their lives. But there is a second option worth assessing, and that is where most people closest to retirement begin to change their minds. What brought you here? Maybe not there. After 30 years of accumulating savings, pursuing returns, maximizing your savings rate, going through life without flinching, the whole way of thinking begins to look different in the next chapter. The spotlight is no longer the target. Once you really start using these assets, there is a different feeling: conservation and sustainability. Just making sure the money is sustainable. Here are a few things I want to say that many consultants would object to. Risk tolerance is a bad way to determine how you should invest in retirement. And I'll give you an example of why, right away. If you sit there and think, Dave, you are wrong. I know exactly how much risk I can take, and I've been through every recession for 30 years. At least for a moment. Isn't the smallest risk you can take worth a look? Which still gives you a high chance of success in your income plan. Because once you see that number, you can decide what makes sense from a place of actual information, rather than habit. My thinking about retirement risk tolerance reminds me of a story. Imagine a 55-year-old woman coming in for a routine exam, and the doctor coming back to the room and saying, "Sorry, it has been done, you're very sick. But if you treat it properly, you'll probably beat it." Then he handed her a clipboard and asked her to fill out a questionnaire, asking her how satisfied she was with the treatment. It is ridiculous. She would obviously say, "Give me any really effective treatment." The same logic applies when people try to design retirement portfolios based entirely on risk tolerance. One risk I didn't mention that is important to almost everyone we talk to is the risk of the yield series. You may have heard of it before. It has been hit hardest in the first 5 years after you start withdrawing money, usually in line with the start of retirement. And there are ways to soften risks, but they usually come at the expense of expected returns. Once again, let's honestly weigh the pros and cons. Here is an example of what happens when you reduce the risk in a plan. And then I'd like to share one of the biggest mistakes people make when reviewing a plan. When I open this, if you're still watching, click the like button, because it can really help YouTube show it to others who might use it. And if you want more similar retirement content in the coming weeks, subscribe. Well, again, ignore the actual dollar numbers and focus on shape. Under the initial growth-oriented strategy, you will see a series of possible results, some wonderful and some disturbing, near the end of the plan. See what happens when we dial back the risks inside the IRA and trust. The top number, the number you die the most, has fallen. But the range narrowed significantly, and the ground rose significantly. For most people, fully funding the retirement plan they really want, with a high probability of success and low risk, is more attractive than simply maintaining the same investment habits. Finding the right balance for you is the whole game. Everyone has the minimum rate of return needed to plan for success, and knows your rate of return is huge. You may still decide to invest more aggressively than that minimum, which is a perfectly reasonable choice. But making this decision without knowing the numbers is like driving without a speedometer. For this mistake, remember that these are not specific suggestions for you, but the framework for thinking about your plan. For personalized planning, you need to talk to CFP professionals. And if you want a team that does this every day, please contact the free meeting below. Here is what we see most often. People don't plan different scenarios, they never set minimum required returns. They don't have anchors, and they tend to correct excess. They have become too conservative, more conservative than ever, quietly reducing their chances of success. Fear of risk eventually creates another risk, that is, running out of money or being forced to reduce the life they want. Hopefully, this will make you think differently about the next 20 or 30 years than you did in the last 30, and help you find the right balance. If that helps, the video I'm going to show you next will tell you some surprising truths about retirement that are worth knowing before you retire, so you won't be caught off guard. I'll see you in that group. Take care.